friends, welcome back to another musical moment in the life of the old-time rock and roller. Today, I have the great pleasure of presenting the first professional musician that I started with in 1969 with the Boston Rock Symphony, and he is still performing today. The legendary blues harmonica frontman, Mr. James Montgomery. James has been nominated with Johnny Winter for a Grammy. He is in the Rhode Island Music Hall of Fame. He's in the New England Music Hall of Fame. He's co-produced movies featuring James Cotton and others. And here is a little sampling of some work that James and I did together off my What's It Gonna Take CD. Just listen to this harmonica. Brother,
I'm doing good. How about you?
doing great, man. It's good to see you again.
Yeah, absolutely. It's always a pleasure to see you, you know?
It's been a long time.
Yeah, hang on for 1 second. We're around with the broadcast. This is just to show that it's a real live broadcast. I had to get my glasses so I could see who you were. Sorry to do that, but anyway, a pleasure to be on your show. You know, we do go back a long way. I've always enjoyed playing with you, and I'm proud and privileged to be on your show. So,
Well, it's an honor to have you. Geez, so many things. You had a great radio show in New England for many, many years. You were president of the Blues Society there. The James Montgomery Band, I think you were signed to Warner Brothers at a very early age. You had the privilege of Jeff Skunk Baxter as your college roommate. Let's go back to the old days a little bit.
yeah, it was Capricorn Records that signed us, the Allman Brothers record label. Yeah, my parents dropped me off at Boston University. Of course, I was really familiar with the Boston music scene before I applied to college. So I applied to Harvard and I applied to BU, but apparently I wasn't smart enough to get into Harvard. But they took me to BU, but BU was a hipper school anyway.
That's true.
Anyway, so my parents dropped me off. I'm waving goodbye, saying, thank God I'm out of that house. No, come on, I love my mom and dad. But anyway, as they're driving away, I've got a harmonica in my pocket. I've been at school for a half an hour, and I see a guy with a guitar across the street. So I go over, we start playing, and we're jamming. So I'd been in Boston for a half an hour, and I already found someone to play with. And me and that guy are still playing together to this day. I do about 2 or 3 shows. His name is Bob McCarthy. He's up in New Hampshire, so I still do a couple of shows with him every year. And then eventually I started a dormitory band in the basement of Miles Standish Dormitory. And my guitar player was Skunk Baxter. So we go back a long way. Obviously he went on to play with the Doobie Brothers and Steely Dan, and now he works for the Department of Defense, by the way. But anyways, and I still play with Skunk Baxter to this day. I usually do at least 1 or 2 shows a year with him. So my college band did really well. I guess maybe for a couple of years at college I didn't play that much, but my junior and senior year, I played fairly regularly, and my college band was so successful that within a year after I graduated, we got a huge record deal from the Allman Brothers on their record label Capricorn, and we were being courted by Capricorn, Warner Brothers, and Atlantic. They all wanted to sign the band.
Nice.
Since they were all distributed by the same Warner Electra Atlantic distributor.
Yeah.
We picked Capricorn because they had a smaller group of artists that they represented. And the next thing you know, we're hitting the road with the Allman Brothers, Lynyrd Skynyrd, Marshall Tucker, Wet Willie, all those Southern rock bands. So here I am. I'm from Detroit. my band's from Boston, and all of a sudden they're calling me a Southern rocker. So it was
Mhm.
a Detroit, a Detroit, Boston Southern rocker is what I was, you know.
Well, there you go. You know, the blues runs deep, goes south all the way to the Mason-Dixon line and down to New Orleans.
It sure does, and eventually I did my third record, I think it was, down in New Orleans with Alan Toussaint. So
Oh
so
man.
that so that was a lot. You know, we were down there the week before Christmas, so there was smoking turkeys out in the back. Oh my God, it was hard to record with it with those smells wafting in. And then they had kind of a Christmas party where everybody recorded there that year. Irma Thomas and the Neville brothers, the Meters, Dr. John. You know, we all hung out when our record was done. It was still, uh, you know, they still hadn't had the Christmas party, so we stayed down there for an extra day or two and hung out with the Meters and Dr. John, Irma Thomas. At one point, I walked by one of the rooms in the studio, and it was just Irma Thomas and Aaron Neville sitting at the piano singing together, just the two of them. It was like, you know, my theory is the best music has been heard by the fewest people, you know.
Yeah, that's
Those
true.
those little jams that happen, you know, in a back room or two guys on a porch in Appalachia getting out the banjo and the guitar and playing.
Yep.
That's some of the best you'll ever hear.
Just the fly on the wall.
Absolutely.
Amen. So do you remember it was around 69 or 70, the war moratorium, and I think BU had a big protest on the Common, and Dr. John played.
Oh yeah, I was at that show.
Yeah, it was a great show. I think he even had a dead bird on his shoulder. It-
Oh yeah, you know yeah, the student protests. I was glad to be part of that movement. I mean, I was happy that we tied the dean up to his chair and threw a brick through his window. I thought, you know, I thought that was really a wonderful afternoon.
yeah, it
But
was.
that Dr. John show, I remember he started, and this would have been before I met him, but I did spend a lot of time with Mac. He was unbelievable. He used to go, James Montgomery, you are a real character. But anyway, so he started that show, if you remember. The guys came out kind of one at a time, and it looked like they were tuning up or something. But what they were doing is one guy would come out, he'd start fiddling around, and then another guy would come out, start fiddling around. It looks like they were doing a line check or something. So everyone's still talking, and then the next thing you know, there's a groove on stage that won't quit. You know, they were just kind of screwing around a little bit. And then one at a time, one guy would lock into the bass part, and then another guitar player would lock in the rhythm part, and the drummer. And what started out like a symphony tuning up, if you know how that sounds, all of a sudden there's a groove on stage that is just undeniable. And then Mac comes out, Dr. John comes out, and those are the days when he had on the big outfits with the peacock feathers and the big headgear, like the stuff they would march in the Mardi Gras with. And he comes out and he's got the goofa dust and he's throwing it up in the air.
Yeah.
And he's got these beautiful singers coming out with him. Best stage entrance I've ever seen in my life. Outside of maybe when I opened up for Screaming Jay Hawkins
Yeah.
and they wheeled a coffin out on stage and they started playing I'm a spell on you got a spell on me or whatever. And he came out of the coffin. I mean, those are my two most amazing stage entrances that I've seen.
They were great, man. Dr. John, I think they call me Dr. John, known as the Night Tripper. Got a satchel of gree in my hand.
Yeah, that's him, all right. What
Yeah.
a great was, and you know, at one time when I had my second home in Manhattan, he was renting Tony Perkins' apartment. You know, Tony Perkins, the actor from Alfred Hitchcock's Psycho, among other things. So he was renting Tony Perkins' apartment over on on the west side, West Ninth, somewhere around there. So I used to go over there and just kind of hang with him. And I remember one time he had just finished his record. Um, and it was back in the days when everyone was experimenting with synthesizers. And he looked at me and said, well, you know, there's only one real instrument on the track. So there was one piano and everything else was synthesized. And I thought that was a little weird for Dr. John to do that, but I don't think anything ever happened with that record. I think he probably listened to it in the clear light of day. And the other thing, talking to him, he would, you know, you say, you know, you look at these people and you say, well, he plays like really great New Orleans style piano. But for Mac, it was like, no, this is how they play on Bourbon Street. This is how they play in the southern part of the city. This is how they play at Tipitina's. In other words, there were like 5 or 6 different New Orleans styles of piano playing.
Yeah, of
And of course, his mentor was Professor Longhair.
course.
And so he knew how to play them all.
Yeah, that was great. So, uh, so we first met, I guess I saw an ad at EU Wurlitzer's where everyone would go and look for some gigs in action. And there was this post up there for the Boston Rock Symphony, an 11-piece rock band with the Arthur Fiedler and the Boston Pops. I could barely read charts, but I could solo. So I got the part there with another guitarist named Melvin Wax from Berkeley. He had the second chair. And I believe you got in on a similar trip. You didn't read music either, but you could solo too.
Well, exactly. And the guitar player who wanted to put me on the show said, I'll tell you what, when it's time for your interlude, which is what it was called, I'll nod at you and then you play. And then I'll nod at you when your interlude stops, right? So I started playing. I was the conductor, you know, realized after about 2 bars that I was not playing what was written. And he looked at me like this. He goes like this. He looks at me like this and he goes, yeah, okay. And so he looked really puzzled. And then he goes, yeah, okay, that's working. And so I got the part and I ended up putting on a tuxedo at Symphony Hall and doing the show.
Yeah.
And here again, the guitar player nodded at me. I started playing and he nodded at me and I quit, which is what I do today. The band points at me, I start playing. They point at me, I quit, you know?
He wasn't a guy named Brendan Harkin.
No, I think Jeff Pitcher.
Right. And the executive producer was a guy named Richie something, the money man.
Yeah.
We used to rehearse above Fenway Park on Jersey Street, I think.
God, yeah. I remember I stopped playing for a year or two in college and the basement, Barry and the Remains used to rehearse down there. And of course, they toured with the Beatles with Barry Tashin and Vern Miller and Billy Briggs. And the Geils Band would also rehearse down there.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of just getting started. So I used to go down and listen to those guys, although at the time I was more involved in this spiritual pursuit, so I wasn't really playing music at the time. But yeah, those were great days, you know.
The early Tea Party days with Swallow and the Ultimate Spinach and Spire and Jay Giles. I jammed with Jay one night playing saxophone on at the old Tea Party one night on one of those crazy jam nights.
Yeah, it was like, you know, the Jay Giles Band had a band house on Clempton Street over by Ed Burke's on Huntington. And then we had our band house in East Cambridge. And Swallow had their band house in Newton. And
Yeah.
Aerosmith had a band house on Commonwealth Avenue.
Right.
So we were all intertwined back then. We all grew up together. As a matter of fact, you mentioned Wurlitzer's. I was buying harmonicas in Wurlitzer's, and this kid comes up to me, goes, wow, he goes, James Montgomery. He says, can we open some shows for you? And I said, well, I don't know, what's the name of your band? He said, Aerosmith. And I had heard of them. And I said, I've heard of you. You're supposed to be pretty good. I'll put you on 4 or 5 shows." And he gave him my manager's number, and sure enough, we're playing Boston University, and the opening act comes on. They got a wall of marshals. They got a big scrim with their logo on it behind them. They got smoke machines. They got everything. And then the opening act gets done, and they peel away the wall of marshals, and they peel away the scrim and the smoke machines. And there's a drum kit with some fenders up there, you know. But of course, we blew them away, you know. Anyway, but so those were great days, and I can't tell you, you know, Steven Tyler was such a great guy to hang out with. Still is. He's just a wonderful guy. Um, he did go through a diva period, which I won't talk about on this interview.
Yeah.
But if people want to call me at home, I'll tell them the whole story. But anyway, Steven's a wonderful guy, and we go back a long way.
Yeah.
I think at one point, and I don't know if I should say this, but I think the statute of limitations has probably passed. Back in those days, a lot of college promoters were really good. I mean, they saw look what people like Don Law were doing.
Yeah.
Let's not forget when Don Law booked the Allman Brothers, he's got pictures of them sleeping on his floor. Greg is sleeping on a chair, and Dickie Betts is sleeping on the floor.
Mhm.
They didn't get hotels. They all stayed at Don's apartment. So back then, some of these college promoters, you know, looked at Don Law and said, "Boy, that's what I want to do." So anyway, so Stephen and I show up at this one college gig, and this stage, they're still building the stage. And we're looking at these 2x4s that are kind of nailed together in a sloppy fashion. And there was a payphone there, and we both had our deposits sent in. So I think we phoned in a bomb threat to the school, and ended up not having to go on that stage that day. But anyway, that's my memory of that afternoon.
Yeah, yeah. We had a band house down in Nantasket too, and we had a lot of fun playing Katie's and Bunratty's and uh, Kenmore Square and the North Shore. There were a lot of great clubs up there.
Well, yeah, and up in Nantasket was the Surf Nantasket.
The
That was
surf, yeah, yeah.
we played with the Chambers Brothers there. Who else did we play? I don't think we played with the Allman Brothers there, but we did play with the Chambers Brothers there, and one I don't know, it was Bonnie we played up there? I don't know. But our band, we had a band house in Hingham eventually, so
Yeah.
so we were actually right around the corner from Nantasket Beach.
Yeah, the early when Don Law took over, when when the Ark closed and the Tea Party moved over to uh, the old Ark location.
Yeah, that's what the Tea Party moved over to Lansdowne Street.
Yeah, I met the Allman Brothers 3 nights when they were there. Brought Dwayne my was it my '59 Gibson Firebird to see if he maybe wanted to buy it or play it, and he played a little bit, and he said, "That's a great guitar, but I just traded a couple of Marshalls to a guy in Detroit for this Les Paul, so I'm going to play the Les Paul." And my college girlfriend, Christine Hayward, did all the pearl inlay at Yuko Frets with Eddie Murray. And
Wow.
she did that famous Naked Lady for Tom Rush on his acoustic guitar. But we were up there, and Dwayne played it, and then she picked up the guitar and played a few licks. And Dwayne said, "Hey, Dickie, we got a replacement for you right here. So you better
Uh,
play good." So it was time to go on stage, and Dwayne said, "Red Dog, bring the Firebird down to the stage." Okay, so I'm standing right in front of them, and they're playing, and they're whipping post, and they're maybe 30 seconds before the solo, and Dwayne breaks his G string, and he yells out, "Red Dog, throw me the Firebird," and he's on the extreme over here, and Red Dog's way over here. And I see my Firebird flying in midair. It had to be 20 feet. Bam,
like,
right into Dwayne's arms. He plugged that sucker in and hit the first note of the whipping post solo. It was a classic.
Yeah, you mentioned Red Dog. He was such a great guy.
Yeah.
Uh, for the listeners who don't know who Red Dog is, he was like the number one roadie in the country. He was like the Allman Brothers, each one of those guys' personal valet.
Yep.
Just a great guy. And on the road with the Allman Brothers, everything was hey buddy, hey partner. And I to this day, because I was on the road with him so much, everybody would say, "Hey, buddy, hey, partner." I got that from them, and it stuck with me. And I say howdy too, and I have people go, "What are you saying howdy for? You're not from Texas, But they were my favorite band to tour with because they were so nice.
Yeah.
And this night I saw them play, I didn't even know who they were. I was there to see Ross on Roll on Kirk because I was a big jazz and blues fan.
Right.
And they were on a triple bill with Redbone, Ross on Roll on Kirk, and the Allman Brothers.
Mhm.
I had kind of heard of them, but didn't really know who they were.
Right.
So I didn't even see them really because I got my way into Ross on Roll on Kirk's dressing room, and I just hung out with him for the night.
Mhm.
And he was just an amazing guy to hang out with.
Yeah. Yeah. Man, those early days, I think I still have a ticket. Led Zeppelin, $3, Boston Tea Party. Jeff,
Oh yeah,
$3.
no, I've got tickets with me in Aerosmith for 350. Used to be able to walk across the bridge from Cambridge into Fenway Park and get a bleachers seat for $4.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. I think it was 68. They won the pennant and they were playing the Reds or something. I know Pete Rose was there, and I skipped school and climbed up the billboard, one of those billboards overlooking like the center field wall, and watched the whole game. I was in
Oh,
a sports bar in Chicago, and there was a picture of the game and the billboard in the back, and I saw myself up there.
I love that. I hope you still have that picture somehow, but it would be impossible in those days to do that.
Yeah, yeah.
But I love that story. I mean, we used to, eventually I had that song out that I did with Alan Toussaint down in New Orleans. It was a takeoff on Huey Piano Smith's Cuba Cuba,
Mhm.
which is about Cuba, and that was a Creole pronunciation of Cuba Cuba. So we changed it to Gooba Gooba and made it sound just like Casey and the Sunshine Band. Alan Toussaint says to Wardell Kazurg, who produced the record, well, Toussaint was the executive producer, but Wardell was the guy who was in the studio every day, doing arrangements and everything. So he says to Wardell, he says, you know that song, that band Casey and the Sunshine Band? And Wardell says, I think my kids have that record. So he says, I want you to do Cuba Cuba. And after you listen to Casey and the Sunshine Band. So we come back the next day and we record this thing, Gooba Gooba. And if you take my vocal out, you can actually sing get down, get down, get down, get down, get down tonight. Yeah, yeah. Whoa. You can actually sing that over the track and it fits. So
That,
anyway, I had this refrain and went gooba, 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 and the audience would sing it back. So when I would go to Fenway and around the corner, they way back then in those days, way up in the right hand, the what would be the stage left, um, of the bleachers way up in the corner. They'd look the other way if you smoked pot up there. Um, so yeah. So I would come out of the tunnel there to find my seat, and half of the audience would stand up and go "gooba gooba gooba" as I was finding my seat. And Pete Gammons, the great sports writer, and tremendous guy and decent guitar player, he said, listen, all you got to do is make your way into the ballpark. If you make your way into the ballpark after the seventh inning, just come on up to the press box,
yeah.
watch from up there. So, Fenway Park, what an amazing place that was.
Oh, really great. I mean, the Boston Bruins were big then too. Hockey. It was a great town. It still
Yeah,
is. You know. Uh,
absolutely.
So you have like 18 albums, is that 17, 18?
No, I don't think I have close to that. I think I probably have uh maybe six on vinyl and probably five or six on CD.
Mhm.
But I have some compilations that I'm on,
Right.
a blues harp compilation. I did this one thing during COVID, and I just happened to think of this because I actually made a record with Junior Wells. They found these tracks during COVID of Junior Wells singing, and they had some of the tracks on them, but some of the tracks weren't on these masters. So they sent them to like Tony Zito and a couple of guitar players, and they sent me those tracks, and I remember recording them, walking in with a mask on and making sure everything was all wiped down. So I did like 7 tracks that Junior Wells was singing on, but there was no harmonica track on them. So I did the harmonica tracks for Cleopatra Records. And now that I mention it, I really hadn't thought too much about that. I gotta call them up and find out what happened to those records because eventually I made a record with Junior Wells. Admittedly, he had passed away like 10 years earlier.
Uh, yeah.
But Junior and I were really close friends. Him and James Cotton were my hands-on teachers. I think Cotton was such a great harmonica player, and he played that little Walter and Sonny Boy style. My phrasing is based more on Junior Wells' phrasing and Paul Butterfield's phrasing. Although who can match Paul? But Junior and I became pretty good friends, and of course, James Cotton at the end of his life called me son, and I called him dad, and eventually made a documentary about him.
That's great. Tell us about your relationship with James and how that blossomed.
Well, I had a radio show for maybe 5 or 6 years, and I interviewed over 100 blues artists, and then I joined Johnny Winter's band, and I couldn't for 6 years, and I couldn't continue the show. The reason I mention that is because every blues artist, 90% of them, told me the moment that they had when they realized that that's what that they wanted to play blues music. I don't know if that happens in rock and roll. I think in rock and roll, they want to be in a band, they want to play guitar, they want to play guitar, and then they start seeing what it's like to be in a band, or maybe they just want to wear Beatle boots and get girls. I don't know. But for every blues musician, and I had my moment when I was 15, and I heard Chris Seo, who's now the leader of the Uptown Horns, and who I still work with to this day. I put him on a million shows, and of course he went on to, he plays a solo on James Brown's "Living in America." I think the only white people to ever record with James Brown. And when I heard that jug band, and within 6 months, I was the front man for that jug band, by the way. And the name of the jug band was the Milk River Jug Band. By the time I got a hold of it, we renamed it the Milk River Sheiks. So anyway, I started going downtown. There were maybe six active blues clubs in Detroit, and some of them you could kind of sneak into,
Yeah.
uh, on Cotton's coattails or whatever, or with John Lee Hooker. And so I started going to these clubs, and of course, there was one that was a coffee house where I met James Cotton. And these guys from Chicago, it was only a 3-hour drive from Chicago. So it was on their circuit. Every Chicago band played Detroit, every single one of them. And it was a coffee house, and they didn't serve booze. So um, at the end of the gigs that the other guys were doing, you know, oftentimes they'd come over to the coffee house because there was plenty of booze in the dressing room. And after their show was over and the nightclub was closing down, this coffee house could stay open, quote unquote, forever because they weren't serving alcohol. And these guys would hang out and jam and everything. So that's how I got to know Cotton, was at the Chessmate. And when the interview I did with John Lee Hooker, he said, Montgomery, go back down to the days of the Chessmate, and you know. So the Chessmate was a legendary club to Chicago blues people, even though they didn't serve booze, because as I say, there was plenty of booze in the dressing room, and these guys would have a ball playing there. So that's when I met Cotton, and then, you know, we remained lifelong friends because it wasn't. It was only a few years later that I had my band and I was on the road touring, and we'd run into him, and eventually, I remember there was one tour we did. You know, I was selling a couple thousand tickets a night in New England, and so they put Cotton on as my opening act, and I made the fatal mistake of actually watching his whole set before I went on, because I was so intimidated by the time I got up there. You know, I just didn't find the groove. So that night after that show at the Westport Players Playhouse, I walked up to Cotton. I said, "You know, James, it's so great to play with you again. It's so great to be on the road with you again." Meanwhile, the hotel that they gave us was a one-room motel, and there was a sign that said manager leaves at 11 and won't be back till 11 the next day. And between my band and Cotton's band and his crew and my crew, we had every room in that hotel. And let's just say it was a lot of fun at the hotel. But anyway, so that night I came to Cotton and said, "You know, James, you know, I'm the headliner on this tour." He said, "Yeah. But you know, I just think it might be better if I went on first, you know." So I think for the rest of the tour, I'm the headliner. Let's not forget that I'm headlining this tour. But I think I should go on first.
It's my choice.
Yeah. And so that's how we finished that tour.
That's pretty cool. James, I notice you have a lot of celebrity photographs on the wall behind you there.
Yeah, actually I do. I take the thing over there, but
That's all right. I can kind of see it, the Hall of Fame there.
yeah, you know, I got let me see, there's me and Billy Squire, you know, at
Yeah.
one point, and there's me with Dan Aykroyd and me with George Harrison, with Patti LaBelle, Johnny Winter, of course, Johnny Lang, um, and a lot of people. Yeah, there was one time I was saying, you know, I was Max Ann was one of the greatest DJs ever in Boston at WBCN. Max Ann Satori.
Mhm.
I think Billy were living together, and I was going, "Geez, I can't believe I have to audition guitar players, you know, because as soon as the guy walks in, you know, if he's right or wrong for the gig, you know what I mean? The guy walks in, you go, nah, this guy's not going to be right." So Billy says, "You know what?" He says, "I'll just join your band for until you can find the guitar player." I said, "Great. Now I don't have to audition." And so Billy was my guitar player for 6 months
Wow.
until Paul and Art came along. And actually, you know, I put Billy on a couple of shows that we did, a BCN benefit and everything. And he told me, you know, the most fun I've ever had in this business is when I played with you and when I played with Ringo. And
Really?
I said, "Sure." When the stroke was out and you were making millions of dollars, and he says, no, because you know I had to think about things all the time. And I reflected about my time with Johnny Winter. I had a great time with Johnny Winter. I didn't have to solve any bad band problems.
Right.
I just had to play harmonica, and that was it. I didn't have to worry about anything else. So anyway, so yeah, and I got there's me and Aykroyd. You know, I had a band with Alex Taylor, James Taylor's older brother, the world's longest band named James Montgomery, Alex Taylor, and the East Coast Funk Busters. Who are you gonna call Funk Busters? And then I ain't afraid of no funk. And so Paul Schaefer and Dan Aykroyd actually joined that. They joined my band,
Unbelievable.
joined the Funk Busters, and we did a Canadian tour. And then eventually they made me a blues brother on a couple of tours with them. But then George Harrison, I got to spend 3 days in Boston with George Harrison because my brother John was vice president of Warner's. And they looked through all the ranks of everyone at Warner Brothers when George Harrison signed his Dark Horse label to Warner Brothers. And if everybody at Warner Brothers, they picked my brother John to get on the plane with George and travel around the country to promote that record. So he was in Boston for a few days, and of course, I studied ancient Hinduism, the Rig Vedas. So I spent a few days with George, and all we talked about was the Ramayana and the Mahabharata, and Radha and Krishna, and so we had a ball. And Patti LaBelle, there's another. I'm just looking at some of the pictures behind me. Patti LaBelle sat in with us, and her manager came to me. Not her, but her manager came to me and said, "Patti really wants you to go back to the hotel with her." And I took one look at Patti and one look at me, and I said, "Man, she's going to eat me up and spit me out, man." I said, "That's too much woman for me, man." I was married at the time, and I wouldn't have done it anyway. But just the thought of Patti LaBelle was such a dynamo. I mean,
Man.
Her level of intensity is like like plugging yourself into like a power grid. So yeah, so there's a lot of pictures back there over the years. It's been great. I've met so many people, had the opportunity to play with so many people. If you go to Wikipedia, there's a partial list that's got about 50 people on it. But
Yeah, it's incredible, man. You're one of the hardest working men in show business, and I think you've got a great business acumen, which has helped you um, uh, through the years. When we used to play back in the day, we'd go through Connecticut. I think it was New Haven, and play Shaboos. You remember that?
every time people come up and ask me, "Do you remember the Shaboo?" I always say Shaboo. Yeah, it was a nightclub in Connecticut. Nightclub in Connecticut. Yeah. Remember it had the big tower. I played there 268 times. Lefty and I actually got out the books one time, and we went through like a 3-year period, and then we extrapolated from that and figured out that because when they booked you there, it'd be Thursday, Friday, Saturday. It was never a one night stand,
Right.
which would be great too, because if you came in on a Wednesday, Cotton might be playing there, and then you could hang out with him and not even have to work.
Yeah.
Or Bonnie Raitt would play there. Me and James Cotton were and the Fabulous Rhinestones were the house bands. So we played more than anyone else. But for you listeners to understand how great this nightclub was, they booked Count Basie, Duke Ellington, Miles Davis, Aerosmith, The Police, Bonnie Raitt, Dr. John, Papa John Creek, Muddy Waters, Coco Taylor. In other words, everyone from Miles Davis to Coco Taylor to Aerosmith to The Police. There's never been a club like that ever.
No.
Ever. Booked such a variety of acts. And as a matter of fact, they got The Police for $27. The Police needed what Roxanne had not hit yet.
No.
They needed a pickup date between New York and Boston, so they landed at the Shaboo, which was midway New York and Boston, and they did it for a door deal, and it was the last night of the World Series. So Sting is pacing up and down. He doesn't know what the hell the World Series is, He's facing it. When can we get started? We really want to stop playing. He's going, "Sting, you can't go on. The game isn't over yet." So of course, in those days, nobody went out to a bar to watch it, especially a music bar. Everyone went to everyone's house to watch these games. So the door deal ended up $27. And so that's what he paid Sting, made out to Sting, and he still has that canceled check. But the Shaboo was like The greatest nightclub ever. They're actually doing a documentary about the Shaboo, and I did an interview with them for that.
Cool.
But I can't wait for that movie to come out.
Now, there was a time you were down at Mohegan Sun, the casino in Rhode Island, with Steven Tyler and some other folks. I think Sam Moore was performing.
Yeah, that was Dan Aykroyd's 50th surprise birthday party, and it was at Mohegan Sun, and I played his 30th surprise birthday party at his parents' farm out in Kingston, Ontario. The highlight of that afternoon was me and Bill Murray trying to learn how to get up on jet skis when they were difficult. These ones they have now, anybody, a kid could ride them, but back then it took skill. Anyway, I had been on the road with the Blues Brothers, and at one rehearsal, Danny added to the band. It was the Blues Brothers, with the real guys with Duck Dunn, Steve Cropper, Matt Guitar Murphy, Bones Malone, Lou Marini, all of them, Paul Schaefer, and so so Aykroyd added Chuck Berry, Bo Diddley, Albert King, Carl Perkins, and Sam Moore to the band. Added, so those are the guest stars. And when Sam Moore did his rehearsal, after every, I think he did all Otis Redding songs. After every song in rehearsal, all those seasoned veteran musicians put down their instruments and gave him a standing ovation at rehearsal, and the whole crew at rehearsal.
Wow.
So I'm sitting there at Aykroyd's 50th birthday party, and everyone's there, supermodels, everybody. And Pamela Anderson was supposed to jump out of the cake in front of the band, and gosh darn it, she missed the plane because I was looking forward to that. But anyway, although I was dating the Lamborghini model at the time, and I was in pretty good shape. But anyway, so I'm sitting at a banquet. Me, Steven Tyler, Peter Wolf, and Jeff Pevar, of course, one of the great guitar players of our time. So Sam Moore's up there singing, and Alvin Bishop was in the band, and James Cotton was in the band, and so Sam was up there singing, and Valerie Simpson, Ashford, and Simpson are there. So Valerie Simpson comes over and grabs a mic, and they start singing back and forth. And all of a sudden, there's like 500 people at this party. Everyone stops their conversation, is glued to this performance with Sam Moore and Valerie Simpson singing back and forth. And when stunned, Sam Moore looks at me and says, "Does anyone else want a piece of this? Does anyone want a piece of this?" And I'm sitting right next to Steven Tyler and Peter Wolf, like I say. And Steven jumps up. He says, "Yeah, I do." Now I'm watching Steven Tyler go up to sing with Sam Moore. And I had been at a rehearsal where I'd seen Duck Dunn, Steve Cropper, Matt Guitar Murphy, Paul Schaefer, everybody give him standing ovations after every song he sang. And I said to myself, as Steven was going up to sing with Sam Moore, I said, "Steven, I really hope you know what you're getting yourself into making this move," right? So he gets up there. Sam goes here. Steven goes there. Sam goes here. Steven Tyler went toe to toe with Sam Moore, the greatest soul singer on this planet, and kept up with him. And that's when I said, you know what? Steven Tyler is the best singer in rock and roll. Because as good as Freddie Mercury was, and as good as these guys, what's his name, Steve Perry, or whatever, the guy from Journey or Foreigner, one of those guys. I toured with Journey and Foreigner. I was so much into R&B. I'd watch one of the songs and go find an R&B nightclub in whatever town I was in. So that's when I figured out that I'm not sure that those guys who were the greatest rock singers ever could ever have gone toe to toe with Sam Moore, but I saw Steven do that. And that's why I consider him the greatest singer in rock and roll.
That's a great story.
Yeah, true story.
You had a caveat there?
Well, I just thought for a minute that Mick might be able to keep up with Sam and Moore doing soul music too, but I never saw that. I did see Steven do it.
Yeah, pretty wild. Now, you're a good friend with Morgan Freeman. You made some movies.
We hung out for a while. I haven't seen him in a number of years. I was part of a documentary film about Delta blues called Delta Rising. And so, I got to spend time with Morgan in the movie, and of course, he had me at Ground Zero. He told my producer it was the most fun he ever had at his own nightclub was when our band was there.
Really?
And of course, when it came time for me to do a slow solo and walk through the crowd, I walked right up to Morgan. He was dancing. I was playing this solo. He was going crazy. So we hung out. So for a couple of years after that, I saw quite a bit of him when he was playing off Broadway. He invited us. We went out to lunch with him, and then when he was in Boston, we'd go hang out there. And he's just a wonderful, wonderful guy, and really erudite, and he knows a lot about everything.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's because he's narrated everything there is to narrate.
Yeah. There was a stretch where he was in every movie I saw for about 10 years. It's like he
Well,
had
yeah,
a hell of an agent.
well, yeah, but you know what he told me? He said that his agent would take like maybe 4 or 5 movies for him, and then he'd set aside like 8 weeks, and he'd have all of the stuff that he was doing, and what not seen by. They'd take his scenes for the one movie, and they'd shoot them all in a couple of days for that movie, and then he'd go to the next movie, and they'd shoot all of his scenes in a couple of days for that movie. So it wasn't. So he'd go out and work for like 2 months and be in 8 movies, but but he did all the shooting at one time, so that obviously they just added it and put it back together.
That reminds me of Elvis before he went to Germany in the army, and he recorded all those movies before he left.
Oh
So,
yeah,
right? So GI Blues and King Creole and all that good stuff kept him in the spotlight till he got back. So,
yeah. Well, the one thing we did with that movie about Delta Blues, it's a great movie. It went through a couple of rounds of theatrical performances, and then it came time to relicense it. I just finished producing 2 documentaries myself, and I'm terribly familiar with the licensing process, which is the biggest pain in the ass that of anything I've ever done in this business. But so when it came up for relicensing for the third go around, the producer just said, well, we'll let this one sit. But what we did is we took Morgan Freeman's interviews and we kept dropping them in throughout the movie. So by the end of the movie, and of course, all of his comments were so astute, I mean, they're just wonderful comments. So by the end of the movie, you got the feeling like it was narrated by Morgan Freeman, even though it wasn't. And to a certain extent, the documentary I just produced about James Cotton, which I get to drop two names and one award. We were one of 5 finalists nationwide in the Library of Congress Ken Burns Prize for Film, which is a huge honor. And a matter of fact, we get invited back every year. So I was just hanging out with Ken Burns again a week ago.
wow.
But the interview with Keb Mo was so great. We have Buddy Guy in the movie, Keb Mo, Bobby Rush is amazing in it.
Yeah.
Steve Miller, who of course is the most blues-oriented rock and roll guy in the world, and Jimmy Vaughn, who's just an intense guy, and all these harmonica players, Rick Esther and Curtis Salgado, Cheryl Arena, my buddy there, Mark Hummel. Anyway, Keb Mo's comments were just so astute, I'll use that word again, that we dropped him in every 5 minutes, or well, not that often, but every 10 minutes. Keb Mo makes this other amazing comment, so we tried to do that so that it would kind of look like Keb Mo was narrating the film about James Cotton.
Yeah, in the Ken Burns Jazz series, Wynton Marsalis, they brought him in a lot to make comments about different parts of, whether it be swing or whatever. He's just a great filmmaker.
Yeah, he and here again, I've only hung out with him a couple of times, at the award ceremonies, but Senator Markey was there from Massachusetts, Hakeem Jeffries, Mitt Romney. So a lot of Congress people do show up.
Yeah.
Everybody puts all their politics aside and just hangs out and honors these tremendously great films. One of which was mine a few years ago. Not just mine, but Judy Lasser, my co-producer at the Woods Hole Film Festival, and of course the filmmaker who is responsible for 98% of the whole thing, Bester Graham. He's the guy that did Johnny Cash at live at Folsom Prison,
That's heavy.
and which is a great movie. And when you see that movie, you swear that you saw Johnny Cash playing at Folsom Prison, although there was never any footage taken. There was zero footage of that taken. But the way Bester puts it together with still shots and films of Johnny Cash playing other places, the way he made that film and edited it, and probably Michael Majoris probably edited it, who's a fantastic editor. Of course, editing turns out to be maybe the most important part of filmmaking,
Yeah.
but when you walked out of that movie, if you ask anybody walked out of the movie, well, what do you think seeing films of Johnny Cash playing at Folsom Prison? Oh man, it's unbelievable. But there was none. That's what a great filmmaker he is.
Yeah. Editing, I know from making these videos, even on my small scale, it takes a long time. It could take a week to 10 days just to add photographs and
Yeah, and it's even more than that because we've got 500 hours of film, and the editor's job is to get it down to an hour and a half.
yeah, that's tremendous.
Filmmakers involved, and of course, as producers, me and Judy were involved, making recommendations, doing this and that. But initially, a good film editor, because as the producer and as the filmmaker, we're so close to it's very hard for us to be objective because we're so subjectively involved in everything. So a good editor will take a lot of footage and come up with a film that makes sense over, and then of course there were scenes that I wanted to put back in and this and that, but anyway, it was a great experience. The Cotton movie's done really well.
Tell us what's happening with the Cotton movie.
Well, we showed in London, we showed in Tel Aviv, we showed at the International Black Film Festival where we won the Founders Award. We screened at the National Museum of African American Music in Nashville, which is a gorgeous museum, by the way, and really interactive. Almost every exhibit there is interactive. It's anybody who goes to Nashville should go to the National Museum of African American Music. And we showed in festivals all over the country. And right now we've been picked up by one of Byron Allen's companies, and of course Byron Allen is a huge player in the film in the media industry. And so we just got all the licensing done. We upgraded all the archival footage to where it had to be. I mean, once you make the film, you're about 3/4 of the way done. There's still a lot more to do. So we're finally in the position with the Cotton film, where it's ready to go out the door. So we're really thrilled about that. So far, we've just been licensed for festivals.
Tremendous, tremendous. What other musical projects do you have on the line? I know you've got a backlog of songs and you've got a couple other films you're working on.
Yeah, the other film that is almost ready to go is a film about my younger brother Jeff, who was a gay activist. But when he started his organization, there weren't any. His first boyfriend ever got shot and killed coming out of a gay bar. Anyway, asked the police what was going on with the investigation. They said nothing. And Jeff said, well, why would that be? And they said, it's just another gay killing, and we don't have the resources to investigate those.
What city was that?
That was in Detroit.
Yeah, that's
But but in fact, when you watch the movie, you'll see that Detroit was one of the first cities in the country, partly due to Jeff's efforts to really, start investigating gay killings. And Detroit was way ahead of the curve in terms of acknowledging the problems of the LGBTQ movement.
Right.
But anyway, so there was nowhere for him to turn, so he started his own organization. And he was so effective at what he did that he ended up on the Aryan Nation hit list. And they in fact tried to kill him. They came into his office with guns blazing, shooting everyone in the office. They sawed the wheel off of his car, so it flipped when he hit 60. He was not only on the hit list, they tried to kill him.
That's terrible.
Why? Because he thought gay people should have the same rights as everyone else. And as far as the Aryan Nation was concerned, that was worthy of death.
Oh.
Anyway, so that movie's coming. That movie, as you can guess, is pretty darn powerful.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that movie's coming along. Meanwhile, we're doing a lot of original material. I've covered songs on every record, and I still call them records. I've covered songs on every record to honor the people that meant so much to me when I was growing up. But this one here, I think we're going to just shoot to have all original songs on it.
Yeah.
So we're writing stuff. The original stuff is going over great on stage. And so we're in the midst of all that. And then, of course, I continue to put together these super bands. I've got one coming up with Barry Goudreau, former guitar player for Boston. Christine Allman, the Beehive Queen from Saturday Night Live, tunes from John Cafferty's band, David Hall from the Joe Perry Project, Marty Richards, 5 years with the Geils Band, George McCann, who's played in Steven Tyler's solo band and also did a brief tour with the Blues Brothers. So, I put together these super groups on a fairly regular basis. And my newest addition to the super group is Wick Grossbeck, the owner of the world champion Boston Celtics, who's a decent rhythm guitar player, which is the most underrated and important instruments in an ensemble. He plays really good rhythm guitar, and he shows up with the Celtics trophy and the banner. The only problem is more people want to get their picture taken with a trophy than they want to get their picture taken with me. So anyway, so Wick Grossbeck, Celtics owner, is playing with us now, and it's just we just put together these super bands and go out, and there's always a charitable element. The one I have coming up on November 23rd in Newport, holiday show. And because it's Thanksgiving, we're thanking our veterans, and we're giving a good portion of the money to this operation this group called Operation Stand Down. And they work for veterans. And these guys, some of these big veterans organizations who I have raised a lot of money for, you're not sure exactly where the money goes, although I trust everyone I've worked for, believe me. Right. Operation Stand Down, these guys, I've seen them work. They go to veterans' houses. They make sure they're fed. They get vehicles for them. They provide transportation. They roll up their sleeves and work with each and every veteran in the area. So that's coming up, our big holiday Thanksgiving show and Christmas show as well. That's on November 23rd at the dockside in Newport, Rhode Island.
Sounds great. Well, you are definitely a blues ambassador, my friend.
Well, that music has been one of the most important things in my life, if not the most important thing in my life. And the people I've met, the good fortune I've had to have been able to play with a long list of people. I mean, when I was in my basement with my wash tub bass and my harmonica rack, which I built out of some of my father's HO railroad parts. And when I was in the basement, he had a great HO layout, by the way. But anyway, when I'm in the basement with a wash tub, playing the wrong key along the Jimmy Jimmy Reed records. My father must have been, oh my God, won't he stop? And I'm dreaming about John Lee Hooker. I'm dreaming about James Cotton. I'm dreaming about Muddy Waters. I'm dreaming about Junior Wells. I'm dreaming about the Rolling Stones and the Beatles. And actually in my life, I ended up playing and meeting all those people. Every one of the people that I dreamed about when I was 16 years old, playing a wash tub bass in the basement. Every one of them I ended up either meeting or playing with.
That's incredible, James.
Yeah.
Congratulations, man. Very, very good. Well, how can people get in touch with you and stay abreast of all your super groups and recordings and films? And I'm sure you have revealed a ton of information, and I know that my listeners will be absolutely thrilled to learn more about you.
Yeah, everything should be on my website. It took me years to come up with this, but it's jamesmontgomery.com. Why is my head so flat? I don't know. But uh, it, it, but sometimes you have to go to jamesmontgomerybluesband.com, but jamesmontgomery.com will get you there.
Cool.
And then most of my biographical information is on Wikipedia because it's already there, and to put it on my website. When you go on people's website and you want to read about them,
Yep.
and you're only down like 5 pages, it's just easier to go to Wikipedia because it's more succinct there.
Yep.
But to get in touch with me through jamesmontgomery.com, and also if you have a decent bottle of red wine, I'll give you my home address, and you can just tell me when you're going to show up and knock on the door.
That sounds good. That looks like the same place that I visited you at. I think it was in 2001 when I flew up and we recorded these songs. Is that the same pad?
Yeah, yeah. It's the first free black church in America. It's the first church where black Americans had their own church and could worship freely. Frederick Douglass was a regular speaker here. It was a big part of the abolitionist movement.
Mhm.
And at one point, I'm on some kind of a tour with black youngsters, and the tour guide said, "No, I got 2 bags of groceries, but I stopped to find out more about my building." And he says they came in as slaves. It was part of the Underground Railroad. They came in as slaves, and he points to the door that I go in and out of every day. And he says, and they walked out that door as free men and women. So and believe me, I don't take it lightly.
Yeah.
I'm kind of getting misty thinking about it right now, but the doorway that I walk out of every day to go to the grocery store or go to a gig was the doorway to freedom for thousands of black people over a 7-year period.
That's incredible. Really good. Well, I really appreciate you taking the time to spend with me here today. And I hope I might send you a couple of originals too, just to.
Yeah, yeah, I do that. I mean, I've always loved your songwriting. I was thrilled to be able to play on your record. And you know what? Why don't you send me those tracks too?
Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah, I'll be happy to.
yeah, because I want to put them on my playlist.
Great, great. I'd be looking forward to that. It'll be an honor to. And man, just keep on doing what you've been doing, James.
Well, you too, Forrest, and the listeners or viewers should also understand. It's an honor for me to be on your show because I have so much respect for you as a guitar player and as someone also who's you know kept kept at it, has good business sense, and knows what you're doing, played with a lot of people, and made some really stunning blues records.
Well, I appreciate that. And I was fortunate enough to play on Bob Seger's biggest song ever. And one of the biggest songs ever to come out of Muscle Shoals, which was old time rock and roll. So working with
Wow,
working with the Swampers was great.
I know that's another. I'm jealous that you worked in Muscle Shoals. It's the one iconic blues R&B place where I haven't been. And Christine Allman, of course, who I'm working with coming up, who's been the grand marshal of that parade. You know, she tells me the next time she's going down, I'm going down with her. So if that happens for us, I'm gonna call you and the three of us will meet down there.
That will be incredible because I got a lot of friends down there who would love
Yeah.
to hear us. So,
I gotta talk to Christine today at some point. I'm gonna tell her, get it done, make it happen.
all right, cool. I'm on board with you, bro.
Thanks, buddy. I appreciate being on your show immensely. I love you and best wishes and I hope we get together and play soon.
I do too, James. Thanks very much. Love you too, brother. Always from the heart. And I will see you down the musical highway on the next adventure of the old time rock and roller. So long, my friends.
Bye bye, guys.
Thanks, James. Bye bye.